Philadelphia has been on edge ever since that rough night against Dallas, and you can feel it the moment anyone brings up the game. The whole city is still carrying that frustration, and inside the building the players are clearly wearing it too. After a performance that left the fan base stunned, the conversation naturally shifted to blame, adjustments, and who really needs to step up. And while plenty of people have been pointing toward the offensive coordinator, the situation isn't nearly as simple as picking one scapegoat and moving on. Jordan Mailata actually spoke up about all of it and did something you do not see every day after a loss like that. He took a moment to defend his coordinator and made it clear that, at least from a player's perspective, some of the criticism has gone way too far. He basically said that the team had chances to take control of that game and simply failed to execute, something that feels painfully obvious when you look back at those penalties, those turnovers, and just how many drives were derailed by mistakes that had nothing to do with play design. And honestly, he is not wrong. This roster is too talented to beat itself that often, especially in a rivalry game with that much on the line. But even though he stood up for the coach, nobody is pretending the offense has been operating at the level it should. When you step back and look at the full picture of this season, the struggles on that side of the ball are impossible to ignore. It is not like the Eagles suddenly lacked playmakers. It is not like the system suddenly became outdated overnight. The biggest shift from last season to now has been the person calling the plays, and that is why so many fans have been frustrated. When an offense this loaded looks this inconsistent, everyone starts watching the sideline to see where the rhythm is being lost. And that brings us right back to Nick Sirianni. Now, it is easy for people to throw out the idea of firing a coach the moment a season hits turbulence, but that is not even close to a fair conversation. The man has put together one of the best win percentages in the league, has taken a team to 2 Super Bowls, and clearly knows how to build a culture that players buy into. Nobody with any sense is saying he suddenly forgot how to coach. But where the criticism does land is in the decisions he has made about the offense, especially choosing to hand the full play calling responsibility to someone who has not exactly proven he can carry that weight. It is understandable that he does not want to walk back a decision he made, especially involving someone he trusts, but when the offense keeps stumbling over the same issues, it becomes harder and harder to defend sticking with the status quo. Meanwhile, the run game has not been able to bail the passing game out the way it has in past seasons. The timing, the cohesion, the push up front, none of it has been as reliable as the version of this team fans got used to. And yes, injuries on the offensive line have played a role, but even with that, the unit has not looked like its usual self. Saquon Barkley has had flashes, but most of the time he is getting met behind the line before he even has a chance to make a decision. And then there was that performance against Dallas, where by his own standards he would tell you it was not his strongest outing. Nobody is calling him the problem, but the run game as a whole has not been the stabilizing force this year that it normally is. Even with all of that swirling around, the team has barely had time to breathe because an enormous matchup is coming fast. The showdown with Chicago on Friday is shaping up to be one of the most important games of the year, not just because of the records, but because of what it means for playoff positioning. Both teams sit at the top of the conference, and a loss here could easily knock either one of them out of the race for the top seed. Chicago has been playing with a level of confidence that you just cannot ignore. Their young quarterback is settling into the system. Their offense is finding ways to stay explosive, and they're running the ball as well as anyone in the league. They have shown they can win close games, and they protect the football, which is something Philadelphia absolutely has to do a better job with. But the Bears are not without issues of their own, especially on defense. They have struggled across the board in yardage allowed and have been dealing with a ton of injuries, particularly at linebacker. They were missing all 3 of their main guys last week, including one standout who was having an excellent season before landing on injured reserve. The other 2 are still up in the air, and their first injury report of the week did not paint a great picture. Even so, Chicago could be getting a massive defensive lift with 2 key members of their secondary trending toward a return. Both were listed as full participants, and if they suit up, the matchup gets a whole lot tougher for an Eagles offense that is already trying to find its identity. On the Philadelphia side, The injury cloud finally broke, just a little thanks to one extremely important update. The moment Reed Blankenship went down last weekend, the secondary felt lost. He is not just another defensive piece. He is the communicator, the stabilizer, and the guy who keeps everyone aligned. So when Vic Fangio came out and essentially said he expects Reed to be ready for Friday, it felt like someone opened a window in a room that had been sealed shut. His ability to read the field, clean up mistakes, and create turnovers is something the defense absolutely needs, especially against an offense that thrives on staying balanced. That relief is especially important now that Sidney Brown is going to be stepping into a much larger role because of the season-ending injury to Andrew Mukuba. Fans have not exactly been thrilled with Brown's play lately, and it makes sense. He is aggressive to a fault sometimes, he misses tackles he should not miss, and in coverage he can look a little raw. But Fangio gave him a vote of confidence, saying he has been sharp in meetings and consistent in practice. And say what you will, but this is the first time in his young career he is being handed a real long-term opportunity. Sometimes a player only finds his footing by being thrown into those moments. Just when things seem to be trending upward, though, the injury report delivered another surprise. A walkthrough turned into a bit of a shocker when both Brandon Graham and Devon Smith were listed as non-participants. Graham dealing with a groin issue is already concerning given his age and how physical his role is, but the real gut punch is Smith being sidelined with shoulder and chest problems. He has been the team's most reliable weapon this season, the one guy who consistently finds ways to get open even when the offense feels stuck. Losing him, especially right before a game of this magnitude, would be a huge blow. And with the offense already searching for stability, this is the last thing they needed right now. As Philadelphia tries to regroup from all that noise, the clock keeps ticking toward Friday, and the sense of urgency inside the NovaCare complex feels completely different from a typical short week. The players know what this game represents, not just for their record, but for their confidence, their rhythm, and their ability to prove that the issues over the past few weeks are fixable rather than signs of a deeper problem. And while the coaches try to settle the game plan, the biggest storyline surrounding the team is whether the offense can find its identity again before Chicago walks into town with all that momentum. Watching the Eagles over the past month, it almost feels like the unit never fully settles into a flow. One drive looks sharp and smooth, the next looks disjointed, and too often it comes down to someone trying to salvage a broken play. That kind of inconsistency is exhausting for an offense that's supposed to be built around physicality and timing. Philadelphia has always been at its best when it dictates the pace and forces defenses to adjust, not the other way around. But lately, it feels like every series becomes a test of improvisation instead of execution, and that has drained some of the swagger they used to carry. It would be one thing if the problem was simply a lack of production, but the mistakes have been the bigger issue. Penalties that stall drives before they even start, turnovers in moments where the team finally had momentum, and protection breakdowns that turn manageable downs into desperate ones. All of these things make it harder for the coordinator to call a balanced game and harder for the quarterback to remain comfortable in the pocket. And when the rhythm disappears, the entire unit starts pressing, trying to force plays instead of letting the offense come to them. That is part of why Reed Blankenship's return matters so much on the defensive side. When the offense sputters, the defense cannot afford to lose its own anchor. Blankenship's presence brings structure, and his absence last week was noticeable the moment he left the field. The communication faltered, players were out of position on simple looks, and the Cowboys took advantage immediately. Fangio's system relies heavily on safeties who understand spacing, timing, and disguise, and Reed checks all those boxes. Getting him back for a dual-threat quarterback and a Chicago offense that thrives off misdirection and play action is a massive relief. Sidney Brown stepping into that full-time role beside him is one of the most intriguing storylines heading into this game. Nobody doubts the kid's passion, but passion alone does not stop the bleeding in a secondary that has been tested harder than expected this season. Brown brings physicality the moment he steps onto the field, and you can see flashes of a playmaker in the way he flies around, but that same aggressiveness can burn him when he overcommits. Fangio's praise shows that the staff believes Brown is capable of taking a step forward, and maybe this expanded opportunity is exactly what he needs to finally settle in. Some players simply do not develop by dipping their toes in. They need to be thrown into the deep end because that is where their instincts take over and they learn faster. Of course, the defense will need more than just steady safety play. Chicago is one of the best running teams in the league, and that challenge falls on the front seven, which has dealt with its own inconsistencies. At times, Philadelphia's defensive line looks unstoppable, collapsing pockets and destroying run lanes. Then there are stretches where the gaps widen, linebackers hesitate, and suddenly a routine run turns into a chunk play. That cannot happen against Chicago because if they control the clock, the Eagles' offense loses possessions and the pressure grows even heavier. This is also where Brandon Graham's status becomes a real concern. Even if he is not playing the snap count he once did, his presence still matters. He brings energy, leadership, and an edge that the younger players feed off. Losing him for a game, this important forces the rotation to shift, and the depth behind him has not always been reliable. The defensive line can still be dominant, but every missing piece changes how Fangio can structure the fronts and disguises, especially against an offense that uses motion on nearly every series. All of this circles back to the offense because Friday's matchup is shaping up to be one of those games where Philadelphia cannot afford a slow start. Chicago's biggest weakness is their defense, and the Eagles need to take advantage before the Bears can settle in. The potential return of two-star defensive backs makes things trickier, but it does not change the fact that Chicago has struggled against the pass and the run for most of the season. This is one of those rare weeks where Philadelphia has the opportunity to dictate the matchup if they come out sharp from the opening drive. But that becomes much harder if Devonta Smith is not 100%. Watching him walk off during the walkthrough was enough to make the coaching staff pause, and even though nothing is official, the possibility of him missing the game changes everything. Smith has been the glue holding the passing attack together on days when the timing looks off. He finds space in zones, he wins tight coverage, and he gives his quarterback an outlet when every other read is covered. Without him, defenses can focus more heavily on the other big names, and the margin for error shrinks significantly. If he cannot go, it places more responsibility on the tight ends and the depth receivers, who have not been featured consistently this season. Someone will need to step into that role of chain mover and possession guy, especially on third downs where Smith usually shines. It also means the offense may need to lean more heavily on the ground game, which is something they have not been able to rely on recently. The offensive line has to return to its usual standard, and Barkley needs lanes that have not been there since early in the season. Chicago's front has holes, but they play hard and swarm to the ball, so the Eagles cannot afford to be predictable. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. Your support helps us keep delivering the latest updates on our Philadelphia Eagles. And don't be shy. Share your thoughts on the news in the comments below. A shockwave rippled through the NFL world overnight as whispers grew louder around a potential blockbuster move. Calais Campbell, one of the league's most respected veteran defenders, is reportedly closing in on a deal with the Philadelphia Eagles. According to murmurs coming out of ESPN's inner circles, the agreement is not just near, it's essentially done, with only the final formalities standing between Campbell and Midnight Green. Nothing has been officially announced, but the buzz is intense enough to stir both excitement and skepticism across the league. Campbell, known for his commanding presence on the defensive line and a locker room reputation that borders on iconic, would instantly become one of the most influential voices in an Eagles defense hungry for leadership and stability. The franchise has been searching for a veteran anchor, someone capable not only of producing high-impact plays, but also of elevating the younger talent around him. If the rumor proves true, Philadelphia may have just secured the perfect fit. Around the league, insiders are speculating what this means for the balance of power. Some executives privately expressed surprise that the Eagles managed to swoop in so decisively. Others suggest Campbell had been eyeing a contender with a strong culture and clear defensive vision, and that the connection formed naturally behind closed doors. What's fueling the fire even more is the sense of urgency attached to the whispers, as if both sides felt that waiting was no longer an option. Philadelphia fans, always quick to react, have already begun buzzing across social media, piecing together clues, tracking flight patterns, and dissecting every vague quote from team personnel. Meanwhile, rival fan bases are bracing themselves for what could be one of the most meaningful late-cycle signings of the season. With no official comment yet from the Eagles, the tension continues to rise, hovering over the league like a storm ready to break. Whether this is just smoke or the start of a seismic shift, the NFL world is watching and waiting for confirmation. That's it for this update. If you enjoyed the video and want to stay updated with exclusive news about our Philadelphia Eagles, be sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that like button. We can't wait to hear your thoughts in the comments. See you in the next video.